On April 26, 1564, on an overcast day in Stratford, a child was born. Born into a life destined for greatness, my mother named me William Shakespeare. I grew up in a relatively small town and was known amongst my friends as dramatic and a bit of a jokester. When I was 18, I fell in love and married Anne Hathaway. Throughout our marriage, we had 3 children, Susanna and twins Hamnet and Judith. We were a happy family, living off modest means in Stratford. Around 1585, I began my career as an actor in London and later tried my hand at writing. Many of you may not know this, but during my time, being an actor was not nearly as glamorous as it is today. Actors were seen as the lowest of the low, traveling vagabonds with no status or worth to their names. Regardless, my passion overtook my pride, and I continued on my journey to greatness. One of my earliest successes was becoming a partial owner of Lord Chamberlain's Men, which would eventually be called the King's Men. After many years of working with this troupe, I chose to retire from acting and focus completely on my writing. I wrote most of my plays between 1589 and 1613. As I was getting my footing in the writing world, most of the plays I wrote during the early years were comedies and histories. I found these to be a great place to begin because they were more straightforward and allowed me to develop my writing skills. After that, I delved into the more intense and dramatic tragedies. As I developed my writing style, I began to think of ways to make my plays distinctly mine. Something I've grown very famous for is the use of iambic pentameter. Believe it or not, I actually didn't invent it. Many writers used it before me, but I adopted it as my own and made it famous by using it in nearly every one of my works. Iambic pentameter is a writing format in poetry or plays where there are 10 syllables per line. The rhythm of each line sounds a lot like ba-bum, 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 ba-bum. Nearly all of my poetry was written in this style. In my plays, however, I would often play around with my iambic pentameter in order to give color and feeling to the characters' lines. This is something I like to call rhythm variation. At times, I would add an extra syllable to the end of each phrase in order to offset the audience and grab their attention. This would also be used to add extra emphasis to important parts of my plays. Sometimes I would add an extra unstressed beat at the end of the line to emphasize a character's sense of contemplation. This change and variation is called a feminine ending. This type of sentence was used in one of my very favorite lines from Hamlet's famous speech, "To be or not to be, that is the question." As I progressed on into my writing, I also discovered that I really enjoyed using inversion in my writing. Many scenes would play out in a predictable way, but by using inversion and switching around the normal rhyme scheme, the emphasis on the words, even odd words, I was able to shake up things and keep the audience on their toes. The thing I loved most, however, about writing was the ability to mix poetry and prose. Poetry is often shorter and more concise than prose. It has a structure and a distinct rhythm from start to finish, whereas prose does not. Prose is often longer, with no particular rhyme scheme, making it quite unlike poetry. During my time, it was seen as more classy to speak and act in poetry. As usual, I wanted to go against the grain and do my own thing, so I threw in some prose for good measure. I often used this prose-style writing in dramatic character speeches to have more of an effect. Characters in my play would often speak in poetry and prose based on their class. Poetry for higher class, prose for lower class. During my lifetime, I reached a relatively high level of fame for being an amazing playwright. It was a difficult journey, but I wouldn't trade developing my craft for anything. It wasn't until the 19th century that my plays truly became famous, and it has been such a blessing to have my work so loved and revered over the years.